like to call this meeting to order at 7:02. Please rise and join me in reciting the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our first order of business tonight, may I have a motion to amend the agenda to move the Upton Men's Club June 20th discussion to the first order of business?
Make a motion that we move the Upton Men's Club request for June 20th fireworks as the first agenda item.
Second. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Okay, second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Right. Open session minutes, let's see, may I have a motion for approval of the open session minutes of March 16th, 2015?
Make a motion to approve the minutes for March 16th, 2015.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, so the first order of business will be the Upton Men's Club discussion.
Thank you. I'm Brad Dio. I'm with the Upton Men's Club. I've been sharing the fireworks for the past going on 8 years now. I'm here before you today to request the use of facilities for the fireworks this year. It's scheduled for June 20th. The rain date will be the following day. And it's the same as it was last year, no changes to the event or plan. So that's what I'm bringing forward today.
All right, does anyone have any questions, any discussion? We all look forward to this event every year, so I will entertain a motion to approve the use of Nipmuc Regional High School fields for the Upton Men's Club annual fireworks on June 20th.
Make a motion to approve the request to use
Nipmuc fields
Nipmuc
for
Field
June 20th.
for June 20th for the fireworks display.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, it is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next year.
I think you should have to stay for the rest of the meeting.
So, next order of business is the community comment section of our meeting this evening. So, members of the public are invited to address the committee from their seats. Does anyone in the audience have something that they wish to share or discuss? Okay, hearing no community comments, we will move on to superintendent's comments.
Good evening. First and foremost, I usually have this towards the end of the report, but you should have your monthly year-to-date expenditure report within your packet. Jay, are there any line items which you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, actually there are tonight, just so you guys kind of know what we've been doing. As you know, we've been in a budget freeze since November, realizing that we can't go through the rest of this entire school year without buying any other supplies for the district. What we ended up doing was looking at what was left in the supply lines, freezing 50% of it, and leaving the other 50% for them to use. And the combination of that and a couple other line items, we've come up with about $160,000 worth of savings. And looks like we're going to have some savings in our choice funds that we typically apply, that we can apply, so that we should be able to overcome the $300,000 deficit. Snow and ice, just so you know where we stand there, we were over budget. I believe it's, I forget what page it's on. It's on page 6. We're over budget on snow and ice by about $26,000. So we're going to have to deal with that as we move forward as well. We spent $34,000 clearing the roofs this year. So actually, if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't be over budget, but it was something we needed to do because we got to keep the buildings safe. So those are the only basic things. We're still monitoring everything very closely. I'm still hoping that we're going to be able to finish in a decent thing, but we may have to freeze again as we get further on. depending, we've had a lot of maintenance issues this year. I just can't tell you how many. Everything that could possibly break is breaking this year. It's just, I don't know why, but everything's going down. So, other than that though, I mean, I think we're still stable, and I think we're in good shape, but we're watching it real closely.
Do you have maintenance issues, or is it in all the buildings, or one particular?
Yeah, it's all the buildings. At Clough, it's HVAC systems. Here, it was one of the heating system actually for this part of the building, which is separate from what was replaced a few years ago with the grant. At Nitmuck, it was a heating unit for a section of the building. I mean, it's too many for me to actually go through them all. It's just like everything that could possibly, we've got water pipes that are leaking, we've got a couple of roof leaks in different areas. I don't know how to explain it, but just everything that you think of that could actually go wrong seems to be, every time I sit in here, you know, the days I'm here, Ken comes in and sees me and says, well, this happened. And it's every day, it's the same thing, it's something else.
The winter was not very kind.
No. You know, we got heaters in the parking lot, there's a big hole in front of Clough where we've had like a little collapse around part of the septic line that runs down to the highway barn that we're still waiting to fix. The fields are a mess because they're still covered in snow and it's still melting, and once it melts, it's probably, I don't know, we're probably at least 2 or 3 weeks away from even being able to get on them, unless they want to go play in the mud, which probably would be fun, but.
So weren't the towns given additional funds for things like road and?
Yeah, Upton and Mendon each got about $40,000 in road funds. There was none for school districts, so.
Okay.
And they're not gonna come and do our parking lots and stuff.
No.
So they've got it, I mean, the towns have enough road issues of their own that 40,000 is gonna be gone before they fix a quarter of what they need to fix.
Driven through the towns.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's about it.
thank you, Jay. Second point of business is we, over the weekend, rolled over our website providers. We've been using the same provider, School Fusion, since I believe 2006. So School Fusion a year or 2 ago was bought out by Edline, which has also been bought out by Blackboard Connect, which we use for our mass calling and mass email system. So I think we've got about 90% of it transferred over. We still have a couple glitches, but I think all in all, it is a improvement over our School Fusion site. We went with what is referred to an out-of-the-box type package. So really, no additional costs from where we were with the School Fusion. And it's also set up so that it's fairly intuitive. It's almost like a Weebly website where, I think the expression is WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. It's pretty intuitive to set up. So just for informational purposes, this was one of our goals as far as updating this and getting it to be more user-friendly. I think we still have a little more work to do with as far as some of our links and making it a little bit more intuitive as far as fewer clicks. But just for your purposes, this is where we are with this. Okay? Any questions?
Is there any cost associated with that?
No. Seeing that Edline bought out School Fusion, it's the same exact. It's actually the updated product. One of the problems that we were having with School Fusion, because it was an outdated product and they were migrating everybody to the new one, there wasn't support for School Fusion. So if you wanted some type of additional bell and whistle, you pretty much either had to figure it out yourself or you couldn't have it. Okay? And then my third piece for tonight is something that I want to talk about from an educational perspective, but I think something that we're very much facing with the FY16 budget. And what I'd like to do is take a couple topics at this meeting and then our next meeting on April 27th. And some of this is straight out of the budget presentation, but I'd like to do a little bit of a deeper dive into it and what it means. And I know there was probably 3 or 4 slides in my budget presentation that spoke to the whole issue of target share, of what percentage towards the school budget do each of the towns have to pay as mandated by the state funding formula. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and then what the implications are for passage of an override, but also for non-passage of an override. Okay? So again, the whole notion of target share comes from 2007 when the state tweaked the funding formula. And in tweaking the funding formula, a greater burden was put on municipalities rather than the state share. And this whole notion of target share, or the percentage that should be contributed to the school budget, really comes down to, for every town or city in the Commonwealth, 2 things they look at. They look at every year, what is your aggregate property value, and what are the aggregate personal income levels based upon tax receipts. And together, they have a formula which is referred to as the Municipal Revenue Growth Factor, or MRGF. I think I've shared that pretty much since 2007, for both of our communities, even though there's been slight variations, from year to year, both Mendon and Upton have been in that 60 to 65% range, okay? However, in that same time span, both of our communities have been funding below their target share, okay? And as we've talked about in the last 2 to 3 budgets, since the recovery, the state is pushing harder for each community to get to their target share, okay? So we actually now have, with the governor's budget being released, the data on the target share for Mendon and for Upton for FY16. Okay, so Mendon actually went down slightly. It went down by, I think, about 0.5 percentage point, and Upton went up, I think, by 3 percentage points. So you can see Mendon at 65, Upton at almost 65, or there's you're talking about a percentage point between them. And based upon that and the MRGF, the percentage increase is tied to something called MLC, or the minimum local contribution. Okay, the minimum local contribution is the minimum mandated amount that each town must contribute to the school district budget for your incremental goal for this year, okay? So you can see for Mendon, the increase in the minimum local contribution is a little more than $336,000, and Upton, it's $271,000, okay? So assuming that each community gave that amount towards the budget, Mendon would be at 60.6%, and Upton would be at 59.17%. So you see in the red there, in the final right column, how far the distance would be from target share. Okay, and again, the assumption being that that is what's given as the minimum local contribution. Okay? So something that, again, kind of is an educational piece, and I don't know how closely folks actually look at this. This isn't all in the budget books. This is also in our budget documents that are posted online on our website. But when Jay and I create the budget and it's broken down by our 2 communities, and you can see Mendon and then Upton, you've got a couple key lines. Okay, so the first line is minimum local contribution. That's something that we don't control. That's something that's strictly mandated by the state. Okay, then you see transportation. That refers to how much we have to pay towards busing that's not reimbursed by regional transportation. Fixed assets, that's usually a small amount that would be referred to things like computers, photocopiers, and so on. But then you've got this line right here, operational additional. Okay, and sometimes it's referred to as discretionary funding. Okay, so to be very clear, Mendon-Upton do fund above the minimum. Okay, if you recall, I had a chart that showed percentage above foundation budget, foundation being the absolute floor. We were at, I believe it was 113%, so we were 13%. So the operational additional would be referring to that amount above the absolute bare minimum. Okay? So if you notice, this funding sheet would to show a model if we were to continue what we've done over the last 3 years, where Mendon is the driver and Mendon says, okay, we're going to give you half of the 2.5 levy increase and half of new receipts. Okay? That amount comes out to be, and I think you can see it, it doesn't work on that, is $204,000, correct? Okay? And when Jay plugs that number in, he works backwards. Now keep in mind, you can't change the minimum local contribution, but by charter, by the regional charter agreement, transportation, fixed assets, and operational and additional have to be proportional to our student population. So you can see there Mendon is at 44.72% and Upton is at 55.28%. Okay? So using those numbers, again, what happens to operational additional? It decreases. Why? It decreases because it has to go toward the minimum local contribution. Okay? So, and again, the Upton numbers proportionally match, again, with the exception of the minimum local contribution. So you could see, again, with that formula from Mendon, your additional would be $204,000, and from Upton it would only be, what's the amount there? $13,000. So the total amount in new local funds for the district would be about $217,000. Okay? So something that, again, this was straight out of the budget presentation. So the blue represents the bars for Mendon over the last 4 fiscal years, what the minimum local contribution increase is, as mandated by the state. The green represents how much the regional school district actually got from Mendon. Okay, so you can see FY13, the 12-13 school year, there actually was more than the minimum local contribution. But if you can see FY14, FY15, FY16, there's a deficit. So if you were to roll that over, a shortfall from the minimum local contribution would be over $400,000 in 4 fiscal years. Okay, so you're talking about a cumulative effect deficit. Okay? So, again, this presupposes that there would be no override whatsoever and no additional infusement of money into operational additional. So, here's another model, another way of looking at it. Here is the actual data showing the increase in minimum local contribution. Okay, so in the solid blue line, that's real data, and in the dashed blue line, that's modeling what the next 4 fiscal years could conceivably look like. Okay, and it's very formulaic. It goes with an assumption of what would the municipal growth factor percentage look like. It's generally for Mendon, it's in the ballpark of about 4%, also looking at enrollment and so on. But there's a reasonable prediction. Then what we can do is we can take a look at what's going to happen to operational additional. Okay? So you can see in the red is actual real data. So the FY11 to FY12 You see it spike upwards. That represents, I believe, the override that year in Mendon was about 270, 280,000, Jack?
Yeah.
But as you can see, it slopes downward. Why? Because the operational additional is being used to backfill the minimum local contribution. So you can see it falling off, again, if the override were not to pass in FY16, and then by FY18, where you see the lines dissect, Mendon will not have the funds in operational additional to even cover the minimum local contribution. Okay? So a graphic representation of modeling of what the future could look like, but in this scenario with no override, what are the actual implications? Again, straight from the budget presentation, the hearing on March 6th, it would translate to, in real terms, about 1.4 million in cuts needing to be made. It would translate to approximately 20 full-time equivalent positions being lost. Again, class sizes as a result would raise to 26 to 30. At the middle school and at the high school, you'd be losing quite a few electives. A lot less supports vis-a-vis things like counselors, like special educators for our students. I think you would also see increase in fees from some of the forward progress that we made, particularly in the areas of athletics, and, in my humble opinion, a downward spiral for the district. In contrast, with an override, again, same exact blue line, solid and dashed as far as the modeling for the minimum local contribution. What an override does is it adds to the operational additional. So you've got no place where those two lines actually intersect, and it gives a backup for a period of 4 to 5 fiscal years. Okay? So what are the implications with that? Again, straight from the budget presentation, you're really supporting a 5-year vision. You're supporting the strategic plan. You're maintaining the programming that we have in place. You're maintaining optimum class sizes. You're building in, vis-a-vis some of the new requests, things like reading teachers, things like inclusion model special educators, additional support for our kids who need them. And then also, as you know, we've built in pieces to reduce or eliminate fees, particularly our athletic user fees down to $175 a sport from the ballpark of $300 to $400 per sport. So again, looking at that graph again, you have a sustainability piece for 4 to 5 years. So again, I chose Mendon first. I chose Mendon first because the modeling of the last 3 years where Mendon's formula has been, again, half of the 2.5 levy, half of new receipts. What are the implications for Upton? Again, this was straight out of the budget presentation. You see the minimum local contribution increases in the blue, the actual increases in black. Again, 3 out of the 4 years, markedly lower. So what was the deficit over 4 years? About 453,000. So again, with no override, what happens? Okay, in the blue, you've got the increases in minimum local contribution, and then the operational additional is drawn down. Again, same exact picture as Mendon with FY18, where it's not sustainable. And actually, beyond FY18, again, assuming that same exact model, this district would actually be below foundation budget. It would be below 100%. Okay, so it would be amongst the lowest funded in the Commonwealth. So again, just like Mendon, with the override, you see the minimum local contribution, and again, the increase from FY15 to FY16 represents the override passage. and at no point do the two lines ever intersect. So again, a different look at it, two different variables, but keep in mind that minimum local contribution, which is directly tied to target share, is a real key factor. And it's still driving the financing of this district. So, in conclusion, as I said before, that formula that we've been using historically, and I know in my first 3 years in this position, really will not meet the district's needs effectively for next school year. And as I've shown, the cumulative effect of doing that over time is creating a deficit. So again, looking at where those lines intersect by FY18, if there is no override, then each town will not even have the operational additional funds to even meet the minimum local contribution. And I think, you know, and Jay, maybe you can touch upon this a little bit. If this override were to fail and the district will make cuts, realize for the following school year, you'll be looking at the same exact situation vis-a-vis an override. The only difference will be the district will really be in a much more challenging place.
Yeah, not only that, I think if you, so let's say it fails this year, you make the cuts, you go to next year, you propose another override, it fails again, you will be making more cuts. You won't be like keeping level service. You'll continue to cut away each year because the formula of getting, say, $400,000 in additional each year does not meet even fixed costs, let alone anything else. So you're just continually going to be reducing things as you go forward.
So, again, looking at this, you know, from a long-term strategic objective perspective, which we've tried to do, and I know the budget subcommittee has very much done this, that passage of this is smart. It's a smart investment for the district to proceed moving forward, but it's also smart well beyond just next school year as well. So I think it's about sustainability. I know if this were to fail, coming back FY17, it would be a moral imperative to proceed on with a recommendation to this committee, and I'm sure the committee feels the same exact way, that you would proceed forward with an override request, again in FY17, not just for the sake of doing it, but for the sake of rebuilding this district. I think Jay and I have discussed this quite a bit, and I know Jay has the perspective of somebody who's lived in the community a long time, sat in your shoes as a school committee member, and put it in this perspective that unfortunately this district has been in this place before, and has been in a place where overrides have failed, and it's taken failure, and as a result the district losing a lot of ground for people to come together and really marshal support. I guess part of the message I think needs to be here is let's not get to that place. Let's not get to a place where we have to tear the district down to rebuild it.
Just one other thing to add to all of this. Once you get to that FY18 where those lines cross, the towns will be faced with a position of either passing an override for town services, because they're going to have to fund a certain percentage of the budget based on the requirements of the regional agreement, minimum contribution. So they either are going to pass an override for town services, or they're going to be cutting town services as well as the school district cutting level services at the school district. So at that point, at FY18, everybody starts to go down the drain, so to speak. We all start taking steps backwards. So, you know, I agree with Joe. I think it gets to a point where sometimes historically we've had a tendency to rip it apart before we try to fix it. And I think this time it'd be nice if we could try to fix it ahead of time.
So that's my piece, educational and otherwise, on target share. And I know you were cognizant of that, but I think underscoring that and kind of doing a deeper dive as far as modeling it beyond FY16. We know what the minimum local contribution is for FY16, and I think to a fairly high degree of certainty we can model what it's going to be beyond that.
Other questions?
Does your model take into effect the increase of the minimum local contribution amount?
Yes.
So it basically trends, because right now, if you think about it, the target share is in the mid-60s in both towns. We're right now, right around 58 to 60 in both towns. And so that's going to trend upward to a point where, I guess my question is, based on your modeling, what year, with no override, do we actually hit, where the target local share and the minimum local contribution come together based on what the state wants?
Okay, great question. Let me go back a couple slides so you can see this. What they do, and it's actually pretty simple math. See at the bottom of that slide that they have the municipal revenue growth factor for Mendon is 4.86% and for Upton it's 4.11%. They take your minimum local contribution and they multiply it by that percentage, and that is your increase. For us and the other 72 districts that are below target share, they tack on an additional percent. That's part of that forced migration. So we've actually calculated that we'll probably be at target share in the ballpark of around FY19.
Mm-hmm. And so the rule that they had before, where if you were even below more than 5, acting on 2% versus 1%, is that still in effect as well?
The rule was you're close but no cigar. If you were above 7.5%,
Okay.
they tacked on 2%, which they did to us last year.
Okay.
We're below it now, so they just tacked on an additional 1%.
Okay.
Good question, there.
But it also includes BVT and target share for their communities, or for our communities as well, so there's more than just us involved in this.
We're the biggest driver,
Right.
but something that's interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up. If you look, Mendon's increase in minimum local contribution is 336, and Upton is 271. And you're saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, I thought the split between the two towns was Upton was 55 and Mendon was 44 and change. Upton has a greater proportion of kids going to BVT than Mendon does. So, and because BVT costs more than the regional school district, more per pupil to educate a kid, that's why to the regional school district, Upton is slightly less.
Yeah.
Actually by 60,000. So it's kind of interesting. But I'm trying to take a lot of this and kind of boil it down to some essential truths, so to speak.
Joe, can you talk a little bit about net school spending, like how much of the bare minimum is that we're supposed to spend, where they came up with that formula, and whether it's current enough? And I know you just talked about a number that we spend at 113%, and where we rank with our neighbors, as well as kind of in the state as a whole.
Okay. So they change it every single year. And essentially what they do is they just tack on an amount additional. Okay, but net school spending comes down to how much you are have to pay to educate a kid, and it's based upon your enrollment and at every level. So there's a certain per pupil expenditure for a kindergartner versus an elementary school student versus a middle school student versus a high school student. So they look at your enrollment and they come up with a bottom line figure, okay? So again, with regard to net school spending, the bottom line figure, we're 13% above it for educating all of our kids within the district. Again, these are for FY15. The state average is 119%, so we're 6% below. I think there's a real variation as far as where other districts are. If you look at that table on the other side, the per pupil expenditures, the net school spending numbers would very much mirror the net school spending percentages.
Okay.
So if you looked at the top of the list, I believe was BBT, then it was kind of like your Hopkinton and Westboro, correct?
Yeah.
And then on the lower end of the list would be, I know Grafton has been down very low for a long time until they passed an override last year. I think some of the other districts that are down there are Douglas, Uxbridge is down there, and so on. But the two lists should very much mirror each other. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, let's move on to subcommittee updates. Mrs. Duncan, the school committee Golden Apple Award Subcommittee.
Yep, we had a chance to meet last week, and we talked about putting together a Golden Apple Award for, we actually tried to narrow it down who this award, or who would be eligible for this award, and we all kind of decided as a group that we would like all staff members of the Mendon-Upton Regional School District. So it could be a teacher, it could be administrator, it could be a person who serves food in the cafeteria, it could be administrative. So it would be available to anybody that a parent wants to nominate. And just to back up a little, the reason why we wanted to do this is to give parents a voice to, express thanks for a teacher or a staff member who's gone above and beyond the call of duty to help their situation, their student, whatever it may be. We talked a little bit about the nomination process, how to nominate, that we would probably have a link on the website so that parents could have access. We talked about doing 2 awards a year, probably a January and June cycle. And we would send out a Blackboard Connect message to let parents know that the nomination process had started and that they could submit a form. We also talked about the fact that this person doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's currently in your life with your student. It could be from a year past, since sometimes you don't realize the true value until you're a bit beyond the experience. We talked about building a rubric for the selection process, and we talked about awarding this person at school committee meetings. So that kind of sums it up, and we're hoping to start it next year. So our first award would go out in January of 2016. And that's about it. Does anybody have any questions? Most of you are here.
Sounds great.
I'm excited.
Are we gonna roll that out this year?
Next year, January
Next year.
2016.
Okay.
Moving on to old business. Next, we have the approval of the 2015-2016 district calendar.
So you should have in your packet a copy of the school calendar for next school year. There aren't any dramatic changes to it. We did meet as a committee. There was a representative committee of teachers and parents. And what we did is, I think we really one of the changes is collapsing our conferences in November so that kind of avoiding some of the no school November, so to speak. And then also put in a contingency day for a 6th snow day. seeing that we've had 5 this year. I think probably our chances are very good that we won't have 6 next year. That would take our March PD day of March 11th. But other than that, there aren't dramatic changes from what we're used to.
Are there any questions about the calendar? Okay, hearing none, I have a motion to approve the 2015-2016 Mendon-Upton Regional School District calendar.
Make a motion to approve the 2015-16 MERSD calendar.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Right, calendar is approved unanimously. So next we'll move on to new business, and we've dealt with Upton Men's Club request. So our next topic is the approval of the busing contract.
Okay, so you should have in your packet an analysis sheet that Jay did. We did go out to bid. We had really one of 2 options. We concluded a 3-year contract with Hellstone and Sons of Blackstone this June 30th, and built into it was a rollover clause for years 4 and 5. We did go out to bid because we wanted to see if we could improve upon that price for years 4 and 5. We had a total of 3 companies show up at the pre-bid conference, but unfortunately we only had 1 bidder, and that 1 bidder was Hellstone and Son. So as Jay's analysis shows, I think clearly we had a situation where this company was bidding against itself, so to speak. So really the option that we're looking at is the 4 and 5 year rollover extension is less than what came in for the new bid, the new 3-year bid. So if you want to talk a little bit more about it, Jay.
Sure. What's happening with transportation right now is the local companies that do a lot of different school districts all have basically what they can handle, so they're not really bidding to try and take somebody else's territory away because they can handle what they're doing. There was a time, last time we went out to bid, where there were some national companies that had come into the area that were trying to get some of that business. Unfortunately, their bids were ridiculously high. Those companies have kind of gone away right now, so there just is not a lot of companies out there doing this. So Joe is right, Hellstone already knew what was in the extension, and what's helped us out here is that in the last bid documents 3 years ago, with the 2-year extension, they made a mistake in what they entered for costs of buses, for some of the smaller buses for years 4 and 5, which we're allowed to hold them to. So because of that, it actually comes out to save us a little bit of money. So to me, it's clear that we just need to do the extension. We'll have to go out to bid again in 2 more years. And at that point, we'll have to take whatever the bids come in. And maybe by that point, there'll be some more competition in the marketplace. But right now, there just isn't a lot of competition. We had, as Joe said, 3 people showed up at the pre-bid conference. One of them is a salesman that wants to sell buses to whoever wins the bid. And he comes to every pre-bid conference. But it was basically Vendetti and Hellstone that came in. So what we need at this point is we need the school committee to approve exercising that extension so that we can tell Hellstone that he's got 2 more years on this contract. And they're happy to stay with us. They do a good job. They're local. I think they do good for us, so I don't think it's a bad thing. It would have been nice to save some money, but we're not going to.
Okay, any further questions? All right, hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the 2-year extension of the busing contract with Hellstone and Sons?
Make a motion that we approve the Hillstone 2-year extension.
Is there a second? Okay, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Busing contract extension is approved unanimously. Next, we have the amendment to the solar PPA agreement.
So Jay.
That one's on me too. So as you remember back, I believe it was in October, we had a presentation here about installing solar carports here at Misco Hill. And I think Joe has some pictures of that if he wants to put them up. Basically, nothing has really changed. The amendment that they're asking for gives them access to the property to construct them and maintain them over the 20-year term of the agreement. I believe you had a calculator in there that sort of showed what we would save over the next 20 years with this agreement based on, projected electricity rates. The savings is fairly substantial, in the neighborhood of close to $3 million over the next 20 years that we can save on electricity. So I think from that regard, and that's including all 3 sites. So this company is already doing 2 ground sites. One is completely approved and ready to start construction. The other one, they've got a couple more forms they've got to file. The solar carports have been completely approved at the state level, so all they need is approval from the school committee to move forward. They're hoping to start construction on those as soon as school's out, have them up and ready to go before school opens in the fall. The pictures there, I think it shows 4 sites. They're looking to expand probably a little bit on D North. So you'd have the 2 in the front there, 1 over on the side where Joe parks, and D North. They might do a little bit more over there to get up to the proposed wattage that they need to get to. None of that has been finalized yet, and we would have complete control over where they actually go. If they come to us and say, this is what we're going to put up, and we don't like that sort of setup, we can tell them no. They also have a couple more hoops to jump through with the planning board. They've got to get approval there. So before they do any of that, though, they need approval from the school committee that we do want to go forward with them, and it's really up to you guys because it's on school property. I don't know if there's any questions regarding these.
I wasn't here for that portion of this. I'm having trouble orienting myself to the photographs.
Can you see the photographs?
I can't.
Okay, so here's the building here. This is the front parking lot where the buses come through and pick up the kids.
Okay.
This is the parking lot over by the softball field. Then where's the next, the other pictures over here. So this is right outside the superintendent's office right over here. This is over in the parking lot here where a lot of the teachers park, and they would probably do a little bit more over there. The other piece to this is the company putting these in and financing this has a curriculum as part of this that they're offering as part of the package so that science classes could take advantage of the whole concept of producing solar energy. It's something we've been asking for with every company. I mean, Joe and I have been talking to solar companies for as long as Joe's been here. I think we actually started before Joe got here. And that's always been a big piece of it, is that we'd like an educational component to it that we can introduce into the science classes, and I think that would be included as part of this. But at this point, it's up to you guys. Do you want carports on the property or do you not? I think Joe supports them. I think it would actually be a pretty innovative idea.
We have somebody here who's a huge fan of solar carport.
I'm a big fan of solar. I'm
You
not a
just don't
big
wanna
fan of
hear it.
solar carport.
Right.
My question I'm
Let
gonna
me
ask
give you
you,
another
and the only reason I say this is I asked the salesman from the company, I said, why not put these, I said, what's more expensive, these carport things or putting them on the ground? And he said, the carports are 4 times more expensive to put them up than on the ground. So my question to him was, well, as a businessman, why wouldn't you put them on the ground? And he said, no, we want to put them as carports. Well, that answer to me is 2 and 2 equals 11. So I am not for the carports. I am for solar. These should not be carports.
And the
I
only
know I'm gonna lose this 5-1, I have no problem with that, but
Here's another perspective.
it makes no sense what they're doing.
When I was
You
at,
want solar, they're putting solar on the ground in 2 other spots. Why do we have carports in this?
But it doesn't change our savings either way. It
No,
affects
but
their
this-
bottom line, but not
I
ours.
think it should go on the ground. I have no idea, there's no
Right.
reason
this is
to put
another
these
perspective, when I was in
carports up.
Parents' Weekend in Fairfield, Connecticut.
Did you park under one?
As a matter of fact, yes, I did. So here's another view of, at least from ground level, of what they would look like. That's my daughter getting her ear pierced. She really didn't need to see that.
So who's responsible for the maintenance again of these?
They are. They're completely responsible for the maintenance. They're responsible at the end of the term of removing them at their cost and restoring the property to its original state. There's drainage involved, because that was one of my concerns, is it's great that you have carports, but if there's a bunch of snow and it falls off and turns into an ice skating rink in the parking lot, that's a problem. So there's drainage built into them, so it drains off, so that we don't have that issue. It's basically their show completely. And that's
How
what this
stable?
amendment does, is it gives them access to the property to do just that.
How stable is the company that we've been buying it from?
The company, it was in the email, I think it was sent out, it's called DG Energy. I personally don't know for sure, but I think most of these solar companies are probably newer. I don't think that this type of concept has been out there and being financed, 20 years ago, so they're probably 10 years or newer. You'd have to go to the website and look at it.
So what happens if they all of a sudden, go the way of the dodo bird and we've got to take care of it, or somebody has to actually take care of it?
Well, on the site
Who's
here,
liable for it?
the contract says that they're liable for it.
Okay.
So I suppose if they go bankrupt, it's hard to be liable for something if you're out of business, right?
Well, it becomes an asset, so the question is, can somebody then come and buy the asset, come into the property, rip it out, and basically not have to actually adhere to the contract?
No, because we have a contract that controls what happens to them. So if somebody buys the project out from them, they have to buy the contract as well. They could come to us and approach us with an amendment, but we don't have to agree to.
And after 20 years, who owns the asset?
They do, and they have to remove it. Or we can extend it if they're still working. But at the end of 20 years, if we decide we don't want to do them anymore, the contract calls for them to remove them.
So what's the lifespan on a panel?
I was told around 30 years, but I think the technology changes. I mean, I actually had one salesperson tell us that they would probably come in 10 to 15 years and replace them with more higher technology because it would make him even more money. This company hasn't said that, and I haven't really pushed him on it.
Okay. So they're basically going to sell the electricity back to us and then sell it out to the grid?
Well, for the two ground sites, it goes out to the grid, and what happens is we have an electric bill, we pay that bill, but we get credits on the bill for the electricity produced on the site, and then we pay them a lower rate. So that's the differential, is that you get a credit for the price you're paying National Grid based on what they're producing, and then we pay them less. The ones here, they feed right into the meter and spin the meter backwards.
Yeah.
Are there any safety concerns for students?
I suppose if they climb on one and jump off, that wouldn't
No,
be
I
good.
just, with electrical,
No,
currents and whatnot.
So we still, what would be the next steps after we agree to this? I mean, they have to go to the towns, get permitting, approvals.
They have
I
to
mean,
go to
they've got to
the,
get financing, I mean.
they have the financing, the money's already in place, they're all set to go. They have to get, on the carports, they have to get, planning board has to do a site plan review or whatever it is the planning board does in this type of project. And that's all they have to do in Mendon. Everything else is, there's no zoning issues, there's no other issues that they would face. So they just have to go to the planning board to get approval. And I know Mendon has adopted a solar resolution, so I think they feel that should be a fairly positive and easy thing to do. I did have a conversation with the chair of the planning board, and I know he supports the concept. I know I discussed it with the green communities coordinators, and they're all supportive of this. So I don't expect that the town's gonna hold this up, but until they actually give the approval, that would be the next step. So that, they have to do that. Apparently, they already have all the permits from the state that they need. Interconnection, approval to do the project. You have to get approvals through National Grid and through the Department of Energy.
And I guess my last question is, do we have, or is there some stipulations and specifications around the level of maintenance that they actually have to do to the site? I mean, I would imagine over 20 years, it's gonna.
Their maintenance is really for the structures themselves. I mean, if you mean like, the ground underneath, no, I think that's.
I don't mean for the ground underneath, I mean actually for the structure itself and the panels and everything else that's up there. I mean,
Yeah, I didn't recall any specifics.
tomorrow it gets struck by lightning. Are we liable?
No,
Are they
they're
liable?
They have to provide insurance for it, and
Yeah.
obviously they're not gonna make any money if they're not producing electricity.
No, I get it, but.
Right. No, they have to insure it, and they have to.
I'm just asking the
Right.
questions mainly from the standpoint of what happens if they actually come in here and build these structures. 5 years down the road, something happens that makes it not, it makes it cost prohibitive for them and not financially viable,
Right.
and they walk away from it. What recourse do we have,
Yeah, there are terms in the I mean, Mike Long has reviewed all this to make sure that we're protected in
Okay.
the long run. I know he spent a lot of time on this, more than he probably wanted to.
All right. I have my question.
Okay, are there any further questions? Okay, hearing none. We have let's see, a motion to approve the amendment to the solar power purchase agreement.
I make a motion to amend the solar power purchase agreement. Right?
No, your motion is to approve
To approve
the amendment to the solar PPA agreement.
power purchase agreement.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is authorizing Joe to sign on your behalf.
We are making a motion that authorizes Joe to sign on our behalf of the solar power purchase agreement with the amendment.
Okay, that's gonna be interesting for minutes.
You made that very complex, Phil.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay. Nay.
Motion passes 5-1. Right, next we shall move on to correspondence. Correspondences with legislators regarding the $50 minimum additional Chapter 70 allocation for fiscal year 2016.
So you have in your packet two different letters we sent to Representative John Fernandez and Senator Fatman and also Senator Moore. A letter requesting increasing the minimum Chapter 70 increase from $20 to $50 per student. I don't know if you've seen both on the MASC listserv, but it's definitely something that's in the State Superintendent's Association, a drive that's kind of gathering momentum, so to speak. That would represent probably in the ballpark of an additional $65,000 to $70,000 in Chapter 70 funding for our district if that were to come to fruition. So to his credit, the freshman representative, David Meridian, has already signed off on this, a letter to the House Ways and Means Chair requesting this. So how will come out by the end of this month in the House budget, and then the Senate budget remains to be seen. But realize the Baker budget is actually a decrease in Chapter 70 minimum from the $25 additional per student down to $20. So, you know, you have in your packet the letter that was sent off, you know, and with each meeting I'll keep you apprised of where we are.
Any questions on that matter? Joe, has there been any movement on the Attorney General's ruling?
I haven't heard a single thing with regard to regional transportation, no, I haven't heard anything unfortunately.
Okay, any further correspondence we need to review? All right, hearing none, let us move on. Are there any other matters not anticipated by this committee within 48 hours of the posted meeting? Future agenda items coming up will include the superintendent mid-cycle review on April 27th and the district technology showcase on April 27th. Anything else? Any other matters that merit discussion this evening? Okay, hearing none, I would accept the motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, hearing no opposition, meeting is adjourned at